Welcome to Letters from America, a road trip podcast searching for the Swedish footprint in the United States. I'm your host, Martin Wern, and today I've parked the Volvo in New Sweden, Maine. And with me in the Airstream is Lukas Lagassé. And we talked earlier in the museum, and you're going to tell me the story about what happened here, all the Swedes that came up here. But first, I want to know about you, and the people who are listening want to know about you. Could we get a little bit of recap of Lukas? Because you are one of those families that came here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my family came to the Swedish colony in New Sweden in the late 1800s. And I was raised in New Sweden my whole life. Attended New Sweden Consolidated Schools and graduated from the regional high school. I went to university at the University of Maine, where I studied government and political science. And I got a Center for Undergraduate Research grant while I was there and went over to Sweden and did some research.
Have you been to Sweden also?
Yes,
oh, yeah.
yes, in Småland.
In Småland?
Yes.
Is that where your family came from?
No, they're from Skåne.
Okay,
the
southern part of Sweden.
Yeah, southern part of Sweden, yep. So I was there, but only for a brief time, and then COVID hit, and that sent me home.
Yeah.
And I lived away for a little bit, but Aroostook County, where we're located, where New Sweden is, it just called me home. I had to come back home, so that's kind of a brief ellipsis.
Yeah, but you've had a key role in the historical, what do you call that? The Swedish Historical Society?
New Sweden Historical Society. Yeah.
Because you were the president of that.
Yes, I was president of the New Sweden Historical Society for 4 years.
Yeah. Which includes this museum that we visited earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. There's 6 buildings in our collection. So it's a huge undertaking. But prior to that, we have a big midsummer festival. And that's actually a 3-day affair. We really go all out with it.
You go all in.
Yes. I started on the midsummer committee because I used to teach ringleikar to kids. And I used to be a student of it. And so when I was 14, I think, I took over teaching it, and I taught it for 10 years.
Yeah.
Teaching.
Could you explain that for someone who doesn't know it?
Oh, yeah, sure. So ringleikar is like during midsummer, there are dances and ring games that are done around the maypole.
Yeah.
The midsummer song. And when we had a school, they were usually taught as an after-school program at the school. And then after it closed, then it evolved, and I would teach it locally, and
all the dances and
all the
moves
dances exactly, and pronunciation and whatnot.
Yeah, of course, that's something you have to do also.
Yeah,
because you're singing it, you're doing it in Swedish.
Exactly. Yeah. So it kind of started there, and then I was on the Midsummer Committee, and I had a very, very close neighbor. She was like my adopted grandmother, and her and I would go down and visit her. She lived a mile down the road from my house, and we would sit and talk about history for hours. It was just so fascinating, and we have a really strong oral tradition in my family too. But my grandmother was. She had a lot to talk about with family history. And so, but my friend who lived down the road, she was fascinated with it, but she didn't know how to research it so well. So every now and then she would ask me a question, and I'd be like, oh, that's such a great question. I need to try to find the answer to that. And so then I would dig a little bit more. And so then one question would lead to 5 other questions that I had. And then I'd ask her, what do you think of this? And she would say, geez, I don't really know. Or she'd have a brilliant answer for me. And so it just kind of snowballed into this like little obsession. So now every time I hear a fun tidbit about New Sweden, I have this strange little file in the back of my head where it just kind of gets inserted and remembered and recorded. So,
but that means that your family, you talked about an oral tradition in your family. You've been. Does that mean that your family history, which is also part of the New Sweden history, but that you've always sort of grown up with the story of your family, how they got here? Is that
but not to the same extent as some people have, for sure. Especially like being from New Sweden, there was always like some importance placed upon like whether you had some Swedish ancestry and coming from New Sweden. I think that now it might be a little bit. It might feel a little bit like exclusive in some ways to be like that. Because then I realized I wasn't as in touch with like my French side and everything.
Oh yeah.
So, but now I'm like reconciling with everything and I'm giving everything the space to breathe. So I'm part Swedish, mostly French, but I know a lot about the Swedish culture up here. So,
and let's dig into that because the New Sweden, where we are, we're in the northern part of Maine, and the Swedes came up here. Can we sort of explain that?
Oh, yes. Okay.
In a clear timeline?
Sure. Okay.
How did it start? Why? And what happened on the way up here?
All right. So
Can I get you closer? Also?
Oh yes, yeah. This is there's a lot that happened. So. The founder of the New Sweden colony, his name was William Widgery Thomas Jr. He was born into wealth in Portland. Portland is our biggest city in Maine. And his father was a large financier. He owned a lot of the wharfs down in Portland, and they were old money in town. And William Widgery Thomas Jr. got sent to one of our premier colleges. It's called Bowdoin College. It still exists. And W.W. Thomas, that's what we all call him around here.
W.W.
Or just W.W.
Okay. So he's the icon.
He's the icon, yep. And such a distinct man, too. He had this beard that was split up the middle. He was a bit of a portly fella, had a real air about him. Yeah. And he ended up going to Bowdoin College and had a real knack for languages. He ended up being named the consulate to Sweden under Abraham Lincoln. So it's kind of like Benjamin Franklin was the consulate to France during the American Revolution War. And basically what it was to foster good relations between Sweden and the United States.
So where are we in time? Right?
This is about 1862 to 1865, that period there. So WW is living over in Sweden at this point, and the thought process behind the consulate was if war efforts for the Union start going awry and they need support, hopefully Sweden might be able to send some munitions or some able-bodied men to help fight for the Union effort.
Just to keep good relations, keeping your back in a way.
Yeah. But post-Civil War, WW is still over in Sweden, and it's when there's a large exodus of Swedes that are moving west to America. And so this is 1868, 1869, 1870, when there are famines in Sweden, bad growing years, bad crop years. There's also a lot of religious tension.
Which is the sort of essence of this entire journey, that mass immigration from Sweden.
Exactly. So W.W. Thomas is seeing those Swedes leave, and his home state of Maine is one of two states in the entire United States, in the Union at that time, that's losing population. And so he's trying to help circumvent that problem.
Did he lose population because of...
Just opportunity. So Maine
people were moving from here to west as well.
Yeah, so it was opportunity. There were a lot of men who had been in the Civil War. Maine actually sent the most amount of Civil War soldiers per capita than any other state.
A war that cost a lot of men.
Yes, of course. But in their ventures, they see that life could be a little bit better elsewhere. Yeah. It's not as cold. Yeah. They don't have to struggle as much to exist. And there's just more opportunity. So they're starting to leave Maine. And William Widgery Thomas is seeing all of these Swedes leave too and heading to America. So he comes back home to the state of Maine and talks to the legislature for the state and says, I have a great idea to help boost our population. Maybe we could create a Swedish colony. And this wasn't a new idea. This had already been tried before. In 1868 and 1869, there were Swedes that the state of Maine had paid their way to come over to America. They landed in maritime Canada, somewhere in possibly Quebec, we think. They disbanded, and they never made it to the state of Maine.
Okay.
And so that enterprise...
So we don't know what happened to them.
No. We think that they ended up going to work in the mines in Quebec.
Oh, yeah.
Or in the lumbering industry. But they never made it to Maine. So it was a complete blunder. And that wasn't under W.W. Thomas. That had been a completely different enterprise. Yeah. So he's reintroducing this idea, and the state of Maine is saying, we've already tried this, and it didn't work before. And he said, this time we're not paying their way. He said, we'll advertise the free land to them and
to give them something to sort of
exactly and
aim at in
exactly,
a way. Yeah.
But they have to pay their way to get to Maine. So the state of Maine agrees with the many aspects of Thomas's plan, and he ends up hiring this man named Gustav Schroeder. Schroeder is a Baptist man who had come over from Sweden in the early 1860s, maybe late 1850s, somewhere in that time period. And he goes out west from Sweden, and he's coming to America because of he had been persecuted because of his religion, being a Baptist.
Yeah, and that's very common also.
Yes, so he finds his way back to Sweden and becomes an immigration agent. And
despite his persecution of...
Exactly, so he finds that his calling is to go back to Sweden and help other people in his faith.
Yeah.
So Thomas hires him and to help him spur on immigration to New Sweden. It ends up being quite successful for them. They have certain parameters and the people that they're trying to look for. They want hardy stock, but they're also very particular about trying to get people they want who have the ability to be a blacksmith or to be the local shoemaker or they need to have these certain people in the community for it to function.
So they were trying to handpick people for the central roles in the society at that time.
Yeah, and even one of them, the main leader was a gentleman who we always call him Captain Nicholas Lagassé, but we're not sure if he was actually a captain. He purportedly he spoke 7 languages.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know that there was ever anybody to test him on those languages.
It's easy to say if nobody understands the language.
Exactly, yeah. But he was the first postmaster in town. He ran the general store. So he was like one of those Swedes that was handpicked in that very first colony. And in our history, it's written that there were 52 Swedes that came to New Sweden. According to ships' rosters, it looks like there were 49. Where that number came from, we're not really
52 is such a low number.
Yeah, truly. It's a small colony. A small initial colony for sure. So the Swedes coming here, it was a 3-week trek across the Atlantic. They landed in St. John, New Brunswick. And then from St. John, they came up the river by steamboat, and then what's called a flat scow when the waters were too low. So basically there were horses on the side of the river pulling this flat, floatable barge up the river with all the Swedes. And then they got off at a landing called Tobik and came into America with great fanfare in this little town called Fort Fairfield. And the Americans were thrilled to see all of these Swedes. They remarked how funny they were to look at, actually, because the Swedes had been told to dress in their best, in their finest. And so, of course, these people are coming from Skåne, and so they have these elaborate hats and all of this beautiful silver.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was one of the things in the newspaper that was reported on was their dress.
So it was in the news as well.
Oh yes, it was a big thing.
It was a big thing. Here comes the Swedes.
Exactly. Yeah. So
in their finest outfits.
And there was a large dinner for them. And they had cannon fare. They had cannon fire to welcome them, but they're walking for miles and miles and miles, and then they go from Fort Fairfield to Caribou, which is about 15 miles, and then onward from Caribou. They stay the night in Caribou, and then they go to New Sweden, their homeland. And the first thing that they did was parade. And at that crossroads, we actually have a monument in our town.
From what I heard, and please correct me if this is wrong, but wasn't there a promise for them to come here, but also a disappointment when they arrived, that it wasn't really fulfilled as it was told to be?
Yes. So they had been promised that there would be a certain amount of acreage felled, and each family would get a log house.
Because this is forest area also.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, it's the forest primeval. There are very few, I mean, of course they have been inhabited by natives, but they're, on the whole, it hadn't really been cleared. People have been trying to inhabit it for a couple decades. Actually, Caribou was founded in the late 1850s. That's its founding date. People have been in the Caribou area since the 1820s, 1830s. And Caribou was just a struggling outpost until the Swedes came along and they brought industry and they brought economy. So when they got here, first they get to this small little outpost, Caribou, Maine, and then they go further into this wooded territory where even the folks that were of English descent who were trying to settle that land had completely abandoned. They had mostly lumber operations. They came in, they kind of took the best lumber and moved on, but nobody would really settle. And
so really far from any farming or anything. It was
a
wilderness in a way.
It truly was wilderness. So they get out here, and there is a clearing for their public lot. At that point, there's no communal center or anything like that. It's just a bunch of buildings, or small cabins. And the Swedes, it's late July. They got here July 23rd, 1870. And they end up planting a crop of winter wheat and turnips. And they're getting various supplies from Caribou, but it's just not quite enough to sustain the colony. And the state gives them access, the men access to start felling their property, because the Swedes they're really coming with just their America chests, and that are filled with only the essentials. So the state is trying to help bolster them before the winter comes, and that was one of the things too that the state had agreed to do, was give them funding in order to live. For a couple years. But one of the things that W.W. Thomas does is he tries to cut off that state funding as soon as he can, because he doesn't want anybody to be dependent on it. He wants the colony to stand on its own. W.W. Thomas, though, is funneling a lot of his own personal money into this project because he really wants it to thrive.
But do we know what happened? Because the project by W.W. and the state, they wanted people to come up here, and they did all this effort to sort of guide them up. They were welcomed, but they still haven't prepared the way they were planned to do. I mean, there's some sort of miscommunication here.
Yeah, so
what happened with that?
Essentially, the plan went through very quickly through the state of Maine. And
to get the Swedes over.
And everything went in a very fast fashion. They weren't anticipating it to move along at the pace that it did. And so things were going swimmingly for Thomas, but trying to get the people in order to build the settlement was really difficult for them here, the people that were physically here before the Swedes. So
because they're probably busy surviving.
Exactly. And trying to keep their own settlements going. So they only had it was around 5 cabins for 49 people. So they were kind of.
Is that in this area where we are, close to the museum?
Yes, right directly on these grounds, just down this hillside and everything. So, but that initial settlement makes it through the winter. They actually gain a couple Swedes who are coming in from the west who have heard about the new Sweden colony. And
maybe that's the 3 missing Swedes.
It could be. Yeah, it could be. And the following spring is when huge influx of Swedes come.
Oh, yeah.
So, this is when the largest settlement comes to New Sweden at one time. And this is in May and late May and early June of 1871. And this is when a lot of people from Jemtland come. A lot of people from Skåne come here during that time period, and they take up they get their 100-acre farms. And
so that's part of the homestead act, in a way.
Yes.
So
they had been 150-acre farms.
Oh yeah.
But the state had kind of trimmed them down to plus or minus 100 acres thereabouts. Yeah. And one of the big things too was when they were settling, is they wanted to be able to create these neighborhoods. They called them bygd, and it was like these little villages within themselves in New Sweden. And so you would have these clusters of people. Like, for instance, there was a large group of people that came from a small village in Skåne by Kristianstad, and they ended up all settling towards the western part of the settlement, and they all had really large farms. And that was something that was interesting. Was people in New Sweden used to say, "Oh, the people from Skåne, they were really good farmers because they just knew how to farm because they had been farming in Skåne." The people in Jemtland, well, they were more geared towards a lumbering economy and whatnot.
Hunting, maybe,
yeah. And so this land was most suited towards farming and agriculture. So some people were already experienced in this, and other people were learning it for the first time. And then there were also people that they were from like a gentry class. They had some money, and the husband wanted to leave. Like, there was this great story about this woman named Mrs. Lundvall who had never done her own laundry. And so she heard some of the women talking about the best way to wash your laundry is using birch lye. And if you don't know how lye soap is made, well, what they do is you take clean ashes, hardwood ashes, out of your firebox, and then you make this slurry. You put water with these ashes, and then the old way is you bore a hole in the corner of a barrel, and you let it drip, and then all this blackish brown liquid slowly drips out of it, and then you mix it with tallow and fat to create a soap. Well, she thought that it was just birch ash. And so she had all these beautiful linens that she had brought over from Sweden, and having done minimal laundry in her day, she spread the ashes all over her linens and then doused it with water, and then ruined all of her linens that she had brought from Sweden. So not everybody was well adapted to this area, but you had to be very rugged. One of the stories that WW loved to tell, and he tells it time and time again, is about this woman named Kirsti Karlsson, who her husband is injured, and she realizes that she needs to help as much as she can with the labor, and he's on horseback coming in from Caribou, and he finds that she has 3 pigs that she's carrying on her back, and these pigs weigh a lot, and she's bringing them into town to barter, but she needed the supplies necessary to continue on living. So, and her husband wasn't able to. So there was a real rugged quality about this existence.
It's hard to comprehend just the effort to do that on a daily basis.
Exactly. There were a lot of Swedes that when they came here, especially in that 1871 group, they were split up almost immediately. So that was really difficult because first you're in.
What do you mean split up?
So the families are split up.
Yeah.
What's happening is in letters that W.W. Thomas has written to Gustav Schroeder, the immigration agent, he's saying, stop all immigration. We do not have the capacity to keep taking in more Swedes. And so because New Sweden was this outpost too far, the roads were really bad in the spring, that it just was really impassable and hard to get here. So he's saying stop immigration, and he meets this group, this huge band of Swedes, something like 300 Swedes that are coming. They had taken the same route as the other Swedes. They were coming up the river, but he meets them in this place south of here, about 50 miles, called Holton. And he says to the men who are able, he goes, I have jobs for you in tanneries or on the railroad. We just don't have the space right now. So I can offer you a job. If you want to continue on to New Sweden, then you can. I won't stop you from doing that. But they're splitting up the families before they ever even get to New Sweden. And so the oldest boys who are able to make money and send it back home to New Sweden are sent elsewhere in the state, but then that means that they're not here to help clear land. And so then these Swedes get here, the second big wave of immigration in late May and early June, and they come to this colony that's just, there's smoke everywhere. It's just stumps as far as I can see. It smells of just burning piles everywhere, and the land hadn't yet been surveyed, so there were people that were waiting on their lots, and they're putting encampments around what had then been built in late November of this big general, like they called it the Capitolium, the Capitol building, and that was they had their encampments around it, and they were sleeping in little lean-tos. You know, they put up a board and then put a bunch of branches on it to sleep under, and you know, they're cooking around communal fires and everything like that. But then these little bands, so the people that came from Skåne, they all settle in the west side, and the people that come from Jemtland, they settle in this northern section.
Small communities, yeah.
Yeah, and because of that, actually, in the 1960s, when the dialects were still intact, there were a lot of Swedes that came over here and recorded people from New Sweden who had only been unto these little communities, who had their preserved dialects.
Yeah.
But
that was 1960. You jump ahead like 100 years.
I know.
So, but I have a question about that, because if you go back to the first 52 Swedes, or 49, that came in July, and they managed to survive the winter, and then you said that there's a big boom coming at the following spring. Have those people sort of been waiting and watching, or is it just a rumor that spreads that sort of come to Maine because other Swedes are there too?
No, so WW is still very present at this time.
Okay.
He's living in the New Sweden colony.
Recruiting Swedes.
And he's pushing Schroeder to get more Swedes to come to New Sweden.
Okay.
But actually what happens is a group of Swedish men write this letter to be published in the Swedish newspaper advertising the colony of New Sweden.
Yeah.
And so then you can send inquiries to Gustav Schroeder, and he can help, you know, point you in a better direction and tell you what line to take and how to get to New Sweden.
Since they came here and they discovered that the promise was really not fulfilled, what was the sort of attraction for people all the way back in Sweden? What did they see? Like, was it the land or the possibilities? Because the possibility wasn't really fulfilled.
The promises
was that silenced, or was it?
No, the promises of the state weren't necessarily fulfilled.
But the land was still here.
But the land was here. It was fertile soil. It was fertile soil. In a short amount of time, you had winter wheat that was 4 feet high because it was virgin soil. It was nutrient rich. You could really you could have great yields from being here, and it was still free land. And this climate was quite similar to a lot of places where Swedes had left. It wasn't quite like the Midwest where it was really hot and arid and it was just flat for miles and miles and miles. This has undulating hills and you could have big expanses of farms and whatnot here too.
And the clue is in the name also. The New
Sweden.
Yeah. It's a new possibilities.
And a lot of it also still has to do with the fact that Gustav Schroeder is Baptist. And so he is recruiting these Baptist groups who are still being persecuted in Sweden to come over to New Sweden. And so the Baptist is actually they were the largest denomination for many years. They had a large church in New Sweden Center. They had 2 chapels to serve the Baptist population. And then there was also the Free Mission Church, which is now called the Covenant Church. And then there's also the traditional Lutheran Church.
So in your timeline now, the timeline that we're trying to explain up to, because you jumped to 1960, we go back. So where are we now?
So say we're in 1871. That second group of Swedes have come here, and they're settling land. there were a lot of people who wanted to argue that it would have been better suited to give fellow Yankee men this property than a bunch of Swedes. So this is what ends up starting to be headlines throughout the state of Maine, is how these Swedes are paupers and they're peasants and they're wearing wooden shoes and they don't have culture and all of this. And so this gentleman, he's actually a pastor. He's the first pastor and school teacher of, he's a Lutheran pastor. His name is Andrew Wireen. He's a Swede who had moved to Illinois in the 1860s and became a pastor out there through Augustana College. He comes to Maine to help serve the New Sweden population. And what he does is this census, and he goes around every home and every farm in New Sweden, takes a record of how many people are living on that farm, the amount of horses they have, the amount of acres they've cleared, how big their houses are, if they have barns, and then it's published to show in such a short amount of time how many thousands of acres have been felled by the Swedes, the roads that were being built. The Swedes were quintessential to connecting all of these communities. They were the road builders. And they
sounds like a very Swedish thing to do.
Yeah.
To just this is the proof. You know,
yeah,
practical.
exactly. Yeah. So that kind of helped thwart a lot of the negative beliefs about New Sweden. And
to sort of show that they're actually doing a great job up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of tension during this time period because we're on the border of the New Brunswick. Maine is bordered by Quebec to the west, and it's bordered by New Brunswick to the east.
Yeah.
And to the north as well. And during that time period, there is a lot of downward immigration into the state of Maine of the Franco community, the French, so the Quebecois and the Acadians.
And that's also your heritage. You know?
It is my heritage. Yeah. And so it's a really interesting juxtaposition because there's this, for a long time growing up, I had always heard about how the Swedes were placed here to stop the impending French coming down.
Oh,
and so it's political. And I was actually reading a dissertation that's recently been published. It's called The Land in Between, and it's this brilliant book that's about prehistory to World War I in the St. John Valley, which is the predominantly French pocket up here in northern Maine. It was a well-held belief that Catholicism was supposed to spread throughout all of North America, and it was supposed to be the preeminent religion. And so most of Maine at that time was all English. It was Scots-Irish, it was English. And so putting in people that were Protestant to stop this Catholic invasion almost was also probably a pretty important aspect of this immigration.
Do you think, and I'm actually just speculating now, but we got at that point in the early 1800s imported a French king.
Oh.
Yeah, the Bernadotte.
Yes.
And we did that, they say, to, first of all, we needed a king. Don't quote me on this, but we needed a king, but we also needed to stay friends with the French people. So we imported one of the generals as a king. Maybe that is connected to keep the Swedes here, because they were already friends with the French in Europe.
That could have been. And there is a lot of influence.
It shouldn't speculate about history, but in a way, it matches the timeline. Of,
it's actually funny because here in New Sweden, there were even certain echelons in New Sweden, a tier system almost. Yeah. Because the people from Jemtland, they were a little bit more educated, they were Baptist, but they intermingled within themselves. But the people from like Östergötland or like Halland, they got to know their neighbors who were French, and so because they were associating with the French, they were looked down on by some of the other Swedes.
Yeah.
And it was really hierarchical, even here in New Sweden, because you still had
Even
all
though
these tensions from the old country coming over here. And like most people would always make jokes about the Skånska people.
Yeah, but I would say that it's still like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, we still do this in the States.
Yeah, and it's a very human trait in a way to do that.
Yeah.
Those people over there.
Exactly,
That's an interesting thing. You sort of import that division of people, move to an entire new continent to build a new life, but you still keep that.
Yeah. So that's why a lot of Swedes they settled in their own little villages, more or less.
And that we can see that on the names also, because we have New Sweden, and we have north of us is Stockholm. Uppsala, which is a town in Sweden also. Yep. And you got Jemtland, which is a county in Sweden.
And Westmanland,
also a county in Sweden. And they just took the names really from where they came, I assume.
Yeah, we have a road. It's our longest road in the settlement, and I always thought that it's called Västerlånggatan, and that's very well known
in Stockholm.
Stockholm, yeah. And I always just thought that it was like, the long Western Road, because it is a very long road.
Yeah.
But
that is one of the key streets in the old town of Stockholm.
Yes, and so that road is populated by most of the people from Skåne, and then there's also Rista, and because there's a large population that came from Ristafallet, I think is the name of the place.
Oh yeah.
So they all had their own little villages and their own little communities, and they all had their own. There were 9 one-room schoolhouses. They all had their own Sunday schools. They had their own quilting clubs, and the neighbors would often build their homes on the corners of their lots, so they were close to each other, because they could work together that way.
Which was essential, especially in the beginning.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
If we just flash forward today.
Yes.
And your generation, you grew up here with this heritage. Mm-hmm. What is that like? Is there still today that connection of Sweden in this area? Is there still that collaboration between Swedes, and do you still? How much of Sweden is still here in New Sweden today?
Well, we've almost. That's a difficult question, and actually, I have. A very brilliant friend who's a professor in Connecticut, and he's just published a little bit of work on our Midsummer Festival, and
which is a big
festival here. Yes, yeah, it's just passed now, but it's 3 days, and what we've done is acculturized that a lot of aspects of what is seen as like our tradition of having this midsummer, and we put up this maypole, and a lot of people like to say that it hasn't changed in 100 years and we've been celebrating it the same way. Well, that's not we've adapted that as our tradition, but that's not the truth of it. Okay. The truth of it was Swedishness was dying out here in the 1960s. The language was fading, and really the language has pretty much faded except for the songs that the children sing. And there are some people that still speak Swedish. There's about less than a dozen people that still speak Swedish around here. And that's 150 years on. But
I would say that that's still quite impressive.
It is. Yeah. It is for sure. But what happened was there was this influx of people from Illinois who came here in the 1960s. They're from a Covenant college called North Park, and they discovered New Sweden by happenstance. Actually, one of them had heard about New Sweden in the 1940s because there was a magazine that had published an article on New Sweden, and this man always had an infatuation with it and had to check out New Sweden, Maine. And so on his way back from Quebec, they stopped, saw New Sweden, Maine, fell in love with it, bought an old farmhouse, an old Swedish log house, a stuga, and that was dilapidated and restored it.
So it was farming for him that sort of attracted. He wanted that. That was the attraction.
It was vacation.
Oh, okay.
And there was still this Swedish tinge to it at that time period. People were still speaking Swedish. It could be, you would hear it in the stores, you'd hear it on the party line.
Kind of exotic also.
And exactly. So it felt warm. It was familiar.
Yeah.
And so then there's this influx of Swedes that are coming from North Park, and they come and they find our Midsummer Festival, and what it has turned into is mostly it was celebrated in the church. It was celebrated at the Lutheran Church for 40 years, but they had more anglicized the maypole. It had ribbons around it, and it was short, a small little thing. So it had changed entirely from
the traditional
putting up a big maistång and dancing around it, and it had gone away from that entirely. So the Swedes still see that there are tinges of the traces of Swedishness around, and they start to reinvigorate it, and they build these...
They amplify it also.
Exactly. And they almost
that's interesting.
Re-ethnicize this
and
town.
make it even more than it has to be.
Exactly.
To sort of
revive it.
Yeah.
Revive that culture. So with all this influx, so like St. Lucia hadn't been celebrated here ever.
Oh, yeah.
And so then you see St. Lucia being celebrated in the late 1960s, early 1970s, because there's a woman named Monica Soderberg. She opens a local Scandinavian import store here in nearby Caribou, and she's bringing her culture, what she remembers, to New Sweden.
Where did she come from?
She was from Stockholm.
Oh, she came from Sweden too.
Yes,
okay.
yes. She married a son of the Swedish colony. And so you're having that influx of Swedishness from other parts of the United States.
Almost like a reboot in a way.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a whole new renaissance.
Yeah.
So, and that's why our Swedishness is it's changed. It's morphed. It's been re-ethnicized. And we've taken these things. It's called acculturation, when we take these symbols and these cultural practices and adapt them and use them for our own. And that's what has happened to New Sweden. So our midsummer is dry. There's no alcohol at our midsummers. It's very.
And you've been to Sweden, so you know the opposite.
Yes, I do know the opposite.
That's why we're not celebrating for 3 days.
Yes. And people love to wear their folkdräkt.
Yeah.
Nobody here, there are a few people that have real folkdräkt.
Yeah.
But a lot of people kind of mingle things together.
folkdräkt is the traditional, or the version of a traditional
Swedish costume. Yeah. So, and people love the brilliant colors of them. So they're wearing like these red vests or bodices that almost look like they're from Leksand, but they're not really. And then some people are wearing their own version of a national costume that's blue and yellow, and
but it's
and it's a connection to the heritage.
Yeah, but it's also an adaptation to, you do what you can with what you got.
Yep.
And you see a painting maybe or something, and you try to copy that, and I can see why you do that.
One of the things, though, it wasn't that that Swedishness was dying out completely around here, because the Swedes also really played up being Swedish, and they would it was a tourism thing too. Swedes would put together, it was Founders Day, not Midsummer, that was the big holiday. It was Founders Day when they first settled this area. And so people would wear their folk costumes, and the local railroad even, if you wore your folk costume as a passenger, you would ride for free on the train.
On that day?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Or any time of year. If you wore your folk costume, you could get a free ticket on the train. So it was that visibility.
Yeah.
So,
but that's interesting, because you can see things like that all over. It doesn't only happen here. You can see it all over, that it's suddenly your history becomes, I would say, amplified again. It gets amplified. It gets more important than it has ever been. And it takes just a couple of seasons in a way until we call it tradition.
Exactly.
It doesn't take that long. And this is how we've always done it. This is how we celebrate Christmas or whatever.
Exactly.
extremely human, I think, to do that.
Yeah, and so that's what's happened here in New Sweden.
You're always looking for something that amplifies the story of where you're coming from. It's a human thing.
Yeah.
But leading back to the question, I mean, you grew up here. It is what we can call a countryside. It's far to everything in a way. If you're going to go shopping.
It's remote.
It's remote. Yeah, it's a remote place.
Yeah.
What was that like to grow up like that?
In some ways, it was a burden, but it was also a blessing.
Yeah.
So growing up, my dad died when I was 11.
Okay.
And I remember after he passed away, we were in the process of siding our house. My dad built our house, and it was a log cabin.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not a cabin; it was a log house. It was,
but in that style.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it had yet to be sided, and it didn't have any insulation on it yet. And he was in the process of getting that all taken care of, and he passed away. And I remember the town came together and came to my house and put the siding on the rest of our house and the rest of the insulation. I was raised by people in my town. You know, when my parents were at work and weren't home, we just got dropped off with the neighbors, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember when I first got my license, I went speeding past my neighbor's house, and my dad wasn't alive. So my neighbor waited. I was on my way to the 4th of July parade, and I was going to be late for the parade.
Yeah.
And
you speeded.
And I sped past his house, and he sat in his chair until I came back by, and then gave me a real tongue lashing and told me, and he was the undertaker in town.
Yeah.
And he said, I buried kids your age. Like, you have to, he's like, you need to be more cautious.
Yeah.
So all of these people in town were all there to support me and my family. It takes a village.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So in that way, it was a real blessing to be here. In other aspects, it was a little bit more difficult. And I think now that I'm older, I'm more grateful for the experiences that I had. But also I recognize if I had been somewhere else, well, I probably would have had different experiences. I wouldn't be who I am today.
No.
And I probably would have had more exposure to different ideas and different things, and maybe felt more included. But it wasn't always. I knew at the end of the day there were people in my community who had my back.
Yeah.
And I've always been grateful for that. The New Sweden community that's part of midsummer for us. Here in Aroostook County, we're so small, and everybody comes home for these events. So it's like a reunion. It's like a family reunion more than anything.
Like a homecoming.
It's a homecoming. You see people who live in Vermont or Alaska or Ohio or California, and they all come home for midsummer. And it's your community. Even though you might not see them all the time, or they might not be there directly, you can still reach out to them, and they're there for you. So it's a really beautiful thing having been raised here, for sure.
But I think you need a little bit of aging to get that perspective.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in all communities, it doesn't matter, I think, where you grew up. When you're a teenager, you're sort of, you have to be uncomfortable in a way. Otherwise, you will not be a teenager.
Exactly.
It's a revolt. But it also leads into, I do this in all my episodes, and I think I know the answer, but we're gonna do it anyway, because we're up here in the northern part of Maine, and you live here now, and you're as you said, you're born and raised here, but you also lived in other places. You lived in Sweden for a while. You lived south of here, if I understood it correctly, and then you moved back. And the question I'm asking to all of my guests is, where is home?
Oh, here for sure.
Yeah.
New Sweden, absolutely.
I figured.
That's
beautiful. I like that.
Yeah, I have to say, I bought my grandmother's home. And, And
is that where you're living now?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was in a job that I was really unfulfilled with. And I wasn't really content with everything that I had been doing with my life. And I came home and everything I felt this inner peace. And I felt like even if I don't do anything, I still have home.
Yeah.
I still have an identity here and people who support me. So I actually live in Caribou now, but I can see New Sweden from my house.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I still have my New Sweden connections, and I still have all my...
But then you helped me a little bit there.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm going to ask you a question. I would like to have your signature. I drew a line out of Maine in the ocean here, so could I get your signature out
for
there?
Sure.
That helped me a little bit with the question I'm going to ask you, because you are home, and you come from this area, but you're still living in Caribou.
Yes.
South of here.
Yeah.
So if you were to write a letter, I got letters here for you.
Ah, okay.
From Caribou to New Sweden in Maine, which is about, what is it, 20 minutes by car?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I can see it from my house.
But still, just to round up this with this question, if you were to write, imagine that you're living another place and you're writing back to home. What would you say in that letter?
Oh, let's see. Probably say it was further away than Caribou.
Say it was in Sweden.
Yes. I remember when I was over in Sweden and when I was studying at university south of here, I did miss home. I did long for home.
You did do that?
Yeah. And I would
and
find
that
myself...
is despite those sort of years as a teenager here.
Yeah. I mean, it was great to have the freedom too, but just how thankful I am to know where I come from and have a sense of roots.
Why do you think that is important for you?
For me, it just makes me feel rooted. I feel like I know who I am because I know where I come from. And I recognize that as such a blessing because I think things are so fluid now. People move all the time. And, sometimes you never have a place that you really feel like where you belong. And here I just know I belong. So.
I think that's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I really do. Yeah. And the comfort that you have when you say that, it actually spreads in this trailer. I can feel it. So it's really beautiful. I like that.
Thank you.
I'm really happy that you took your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming, Lukas. It's been a pleasure. It's a lot of facts to learn, and I'm very grateful that you explained all of this to me because it has an interesting history. And also, I am a Swede, and I visit now New Sweden. I've also visited Stockholm, which is weird for a Swede to do. But it feels very welcoming, and it's a very nice place to be. So I can understand the attraction that this area had over the years. Yeah. I can really see that. So So thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been nice.
Well, thank you.
Nice talking to you.
You have listened to Letters from America, a weekly road trip podcast celebrating the Swedish heritage in the United States. Produced in collaboration with the Embassy of Sweden in Washington, D.C., Volvo Cars USA, Volvo Trucks USA, and Airstream.